So, the last things that I want to talk about before we wrap up with dissonance are the ways that dissonance can be used for positive behavior change. Um, I think there can be a sense once you hear about all these things about dissonance theory that it's just like a way that we are kind of silly, right? This is just another like bias that doesn't necessarily help us in any way, and we just kind of have this weird way of reacting to things, basically. But we've actually already talked about some examples that might show how dissonance can be useful. It might sometimes lead to people making safer decisions when they're realizing that they need to act in line with their values, like not driving home drunk, for example, or trying to be more frugal or environmentally conscious when deciding if they should take public transit or drive somewhere. And of course, you've probably thought of a lot of other examples while you've read the textbook and listened to some of these lectures. But we do know from a lot of evidence that we can use dissonance to change people's behavior for the better. Unfortunately, it's just basically you have to make people feel like hypocrites or feel like they're inconsistent. So you need to drive them to this negative feeling, basically, to get them to change their minds. I would draw a line here between like feeling a little hypocritical to against shaming people. Like we know that a really good way to get people to never change their behavior is to guilt them or insult them or make them feel ashamed of their behavior. That tends to like lead people to more retreat into themselves and continue doing what they're doing. But if you can get people to kind of realize on their own that what they're doing is inconsistent, then they might be much more likely to change. One early study about this had to do with people and their water use when they showered. So this study, again, another one of these studies that you wonder if it would be approved by an IRB, again, in the modern era, but they were basically waiting for people on the way to a locker room after swimming practice and asked the people, how long are the showers that you take? And, in general, people are probably going to kind of underestimate the length of their shower because they don't want to be taking up space for other people or maybe more importantly, wasting water. So for some of the people, they induced hypocrisy in them basically by having them talk about water conservation and talking about how important it was with the researcher. Then they had a research assistant around the corner in the locker room who was recording the length of the shower of each participant by just listening to the sound of the water. Nothing terribly invasive. And what they found was that when people felt hypocrisy, when they talked about the length of their showers and talked about water conservation, then they, seem to have been reflecting on that during the shower or before, and they hurried up and they took shorter showers. So you can get people to think through these things and kind of change their behavior for the better in some ways. This happens with driving too. Interesting study where they approach people out in the real world at a market and ask them to advocate safe driving, like record kind of a little PSA and talk about how safe driving is important. Some of these people, they had them think about times when they had been unsafe drivers themselves. So thinking about times where you've gotten upset or you've been speeding or you ran a red light or something like that. So they're inducing hypocrisy in these people by having them affirm how important safe driving is while thinking about how they have in the past maybe not necessarily driven so safely. The outcome that they wanted to look at here was their willingness to have something called a tachometer installed in their car. This is something that it basically just records like jostling and moving. They use tachometers. I know seismographs are more common in earthquakes, but tachometers are used sometimes there too. And it's going to record more like jostling around if you're a worse driver, is what they kind of explained to these people. So they wanted to ask people, hey, we are also doing a study where we want to actually record people's driving behavior. Would you participate in that study for us? And if they only asked people to just advocate for safe driving, a very small proportion of people were willing to do it. But if you made them feel hypocritical by making them think about their past bad driving, then that almost tripled the rate that people were willing to have this tachometer installed. So, uh, it's not even just enough to get people to think about the uh, type of behavior they should be engaging in. They need to feel like hypocrites. They need to feel like they are inconsistent to be more likely to do the right thing. Another really interesting paper that looked at this had to do with people choosing safe sex options, basically. If they wanted to promote condom use among the students at the university where they conducted this study. And they went about inducing dissonance and hypocrisy in a pretty systematic way. So there were four different conditions that people were assigned to in this one. People that had just information about condom use, that they called that a control condition. They had people be mindful about their past transgressions, like wonder, think about times when you were unsafe, and reflect on that. They had people make a public commitment. In this case, they had people, film a little PSA for condom use and talk about how important it was on camera with the expectation that that was going to be shown to other people, and a hypocrisy condition. The hypocrisy condition is just a combination of the mindfulness and public commitment conditions that people are, thinking about their past mistakes and transgressions, not using condoms and practicing safe sex, and then talking aloud and recording the commitment that you're making to engaging in safe sex. So what they found then was when they looked at how many condoms the people bought. They had it all set up so the DV was, you give people at the end of the study a chance to buy condoms, not just take condoms, because people might just grab as many as they felt like in that moment, but they had to actually kind of buy into this, right? They had to make a monetary commitment with some of the money they got from the study to actually exchange for the condoms. So you can see that in the information only, mindfulness only, commitment only conditions, there's not too big of a difference here, right? In fact, the information only condition is even higher than the commitment only condition. So if you had people just, give a speech about it, it didn't, if anything, it might have reduced the likelihood that people are going to buy condoms. So only between 30 and 50% of people are purchasing condoms in these other conditions. But if people were mindful and had to make a public commitment and felt that hypocrisy from thinking about their past transgressions and then saying how important it is, that was related to an enormous increase. Up to over 80% of people in that condition bought condoms. So the hypocrisy that you are engaging in, it does seem to be more effective if you are doing it publicly. That it's again underlining the idea that impression management's suggestions about dissonance theory do matter. It's not just about you feeling that sort of tension. It's about wanting to appear consistent and, in this case, responsible in front of other people. And there are tons of other examples about this. We'll talk about some more throughout the rest of the course. But you can get people to actually engage in volunteer work or continue to engage in it. You can get them to engage in more environmentally friendly types of behaviors. You can get them to reduce their spending habits. All these different things. You're probably thinking of other examples as you watch this too. But the big point that I want to make is that dissonance isn't just some weird little thing that we tend to be stricken by. It's that you can actually sort of harness this aspect of our psychology to make people make better choices and make positive behavior changes. All right.